Welcome to the B2B Category Creators Podcast, hosted by Gil Alouche, founder and CEO of Metadata.io. This podcast is all about sharing the real and sometimes uncomfortable secrets of category creation in the B2B software space. On this week's episode, Gil talks category creation with Lars Nilsson, VP of Global Sales Development at Snowflake, and Mikita Mikado, CEO of Pandadoc.
Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Gil Alouche. I'm the founder and CEO of Metadata, and this is Category Creator episode, I don't remember which, I think 27. And I have with me Mikita and Lars. I know both of you, and I'm really excited to have you both on the podcast. Lars, maybe we start with you. Maybe you can give a quick introduction of yourself and the company.
Yeah, so Lars Nilsson, currently I'm the VP of Global Sales Development at Snowflake. And I would say this has been about a 25-year journey for me. I started building SDR teams in the Valley back in 1997. And I've been iterating on that model, the model where you take prospecting and you give it to a function and a role that's all they do. And I just love it. I love hiring earlier in their career younger people and developing them and their sales skills, and then generating demand and revenues for venture-backed startups. Last four companies I was at, Portal Software, Riverbed Technology, Cloudera, and ArcSight. And the kind of cool, crazy stat, all four of those companies grew through seed all the way to IPO. And I've always done the same two things. I build out sales development and inside sales and revenue operations. And so that's kind of my, I guess that's my my superpower.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Mikita, you're up next. I remember that you and I met, I think we just talked about it like 3 or 4 years ago when Bill Portelli introduced us. We're a happy customer of Pandadoc since, and it was really cool to see how you guys grew, differentiated, all that good stuff. Would love to hear a quick background of yourself for our listeners.
Sure. My name is Mikita. I'm a software entrepreneur from Minsk, Belarus, now happily living in California. Pandadoc is a software as a service product that helps to streamline document workflows, things like you work with proposals, contracts, generation of those documents, signing of them, and so on and so forth. And as far we support more than 30,000 businesses globally with our product. And we are a team of about 700 people.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you both again for joining. I'm really excited. You have different backgrounds, complementary backgrounds. Both are well known in your space. This podcast started, actually it was supposed to be a webinar, but Manny Medina was the one who inspired me to make a podcast out of it. So now it's a podcast about category creation, because it's such a buzzword and something that's sometimes being asked of companies, sometimes when it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. So all we're trying to do is just unravel some of it. And then for the ones who want to do it, give some tactics, practical tactics. So maybe we'll start with you, Mikita, because I saw you nod. When you think about category creation, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
The first thing that comes to my mind is whether there's any value in doing that. It's a very costly and involved activity. And the first thing I think about is, well, is it worth it for this or that company or this or that product?
Very nice. That's a great answer. Thank you. Lars, what about you?
So I look at it, again, I've been in sales. I've been a seller or a sales leader my entire career. But I absolutely feel like the role and the function of the SDR, which really has existed at scale maybe for 15 years, but certainly hundreds of years before that, there was sales. but the creation of the SDR role category, I think has completely changed the selling world. We've broken up prospecting and selling into two very distinctive roles. And I think it's important because they're two very different motions. And so, category creation in the broader sense of sales, I absolutely feel like SDRs is a category. It's now stands by itself. And if you're a company wanting to grow exponentially and you're selling an enterprise class B2B type product, I think you have to have this motion. And I couldn't be more proud to be associated with the category of the SDR.
Love it. So you're talking about the category as a movement, as a skill, as a profession. That's very cool. I want to go back to the both of these. I almost forgot. It's Friday. I know, Mikita, you're drinking tea. I don't think anything in there, but it's okay. Lars, you're drinking an alcoholic beverage, so we can intoxicate together. Cheers, everyone. Mikita, you as well. Cheers to you. Happy Friday.
Here's my tea.
Yeah, it's cool. I think they said only with water it's bad luck to cheer, but everything else I think is good. It's game. Loved your comments about character creation. I think you have different ideas. I think about it a little bit. And it's funny because many guests really do have different take on it. Some start companies thinking about category creation, some stumble upon it, and some try to avoid it. Mikita, I know your space fairly well. Not obviously nothing close to yours, but how I do perceive some of the players to be similar. In a space like yours, how do you choose whether you are going to, when you ask yourself that question, is it worth it?
What is a category for you, Joe? How do you define it? To help me to calibrate my answer.
Absolutely. So a category can be a set of companies that are trying to solve for a fairly similar, pain point. So maybe marketing automation can be a category, or sales development tools, to Lars' point, like an outreach or SalesLoft is a category. Converse marketing or subcategories of converse marketing could be a category. Those are just categories I'm familiar with, of course.
Got it. The way I understand categories is that it is an abstraction that helps to compartmentalize a certain product or service in primarily customer's mind. If we want a broad spectrum of companies or people to think about a specific need in a kind of like boxed manner, we create categories. And then being first, like being the first mover, being someone who actually sets that term or amplifies that term and becomes number one within that term, is beneficial to businesses, because all of a sudden they become the first consideration, and within that compartment, right, within that need box, let's call it that way. Now, to me, the question of whether it's worth it is more of a calculation that is, it's a go-to-market calculation. There's a category you can easily attach to at a certain stage of your company and grow as fast as you want to at the expense you want to grow, then maybe that's the way to go. But in some cases, there's no need, or in other cases, there is a need, but then you face a lot of competition. So what you do is you try to create another box with need and like understanding of what's good or what's hot, like what's important within, again, like customers' mind. And like the answer to that question might be different based on the company's development, based on the stage you're in. when we started the company, we had no resources or any kind of know-how on how to build a category or what the category is and what are those for and so on and so forth. So it made absolutely no sense for us to
And does it now?
get on that endeavor. Now, I don't think we're still like ready, and we can like pound ourselves in our chest and be like, oh, we're going to create a category and so on and so forth. But we're much readier than years back.
Sounds good. you kind of get an answer. You get a philosophical answer, but then you give some examples from yours, which I'm very interested in, because you are in a space that I'm not completely unfamiliar with, and so it's interesting. And I think many people, sometimes there are some spaces where it's just like a load balancer. It's hard to know. But with something that you use every day, you have at least you have the perception that you understand it better. So it'll be interesting to hear your take about really how do you think about it for your space, given companies, other companies that either past companies or existing. Lars, you talked about category creation from a different point of view that I've heard until now, which is the kind of like sales in general changed, and it's like it's only been like 15-20 years of SDR being in existence, and I really like seeing people from early stage of their career grow into that, like that being that first kind of career point for them. You said 97, if I'm not mistaken, when you started. What happened? Like, can you talk about some things that you've seen in 97 that you may have caught up to, or others that seem to be like signs of this change happening?
Yeah, well, I remember very clearly my manager at the time, his name was Bernie Skamra, and we were at a company called Portal Software. It was a very early stage, maybe in Series A funded company in the online billing space. And we had started building out a sales organization, and sales reps are very, very expensive. Not only their salaries, but if they hit it big, their commissions can be, wildly
Absolutely
profitable. And he came to me and he said, Lars, I'm paying my sales reps too much to prospect. I want them selling, negotiating, and closing. Do me a favor and build me a team where my team doesn't have to do as much prospecting. And what he wanted me to do was build a team. At the time, I had a team of inside or inbound. And back then it was called telemarketing. The entire category of inside sales or phone-based sales was dubbed telemarketing. But he didn't want my reps managing inbound leads and qualifying them. He wanted me to go outbound and to help his reps get the first meeting. And that was in 1997. So before Salesforce came on to the scene, and this is 7 years before Aaron Ross wrote the book and the Bible and predictable revenue that many people in my world have read. And I didn't really know exactly, other than, I'll do that. And I did. And I'll never forget a year later when my team looked at me and said, Lars, why do we have marketing in our title, telemarketing? And I didn't really have an answer for them. We sat in a room, we got some beers and some pizza, and we brainstormed a bunch of names, and we came up with account development rep and sales development rep and business development rep. And we decided to name the team account development. But we were very focused going outbound, targeting our outreach at individual personas, at target accounts, trying to get that first meeting. And it took off. And
did you see it happen in other places, or mostly within your team?
No, I don't know. Again, it didn't start coming, I think, until, maybe a decade later.
Mm-hmm.
Today, SDR, BDR, LDR is a de facto standard,
no question,
in our industry. And in fact, you talked about Manny being on your show and turning this from a webinar. So Manny, interestingly, he was building out a recruiting platform.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's right.
He ended up pivoting into a space that was innovated on by TK Cater at ToutApp. And there was another company, Yesware,
Right.
that were the innovators in the sales engagement space. But it was starting to pick up steam because SDRs were a thing 10 years ago. And then Kyle over at SalesLoft decides to pivot his company, which was really more aligned. He had that API that allowed you to scrape LinkedIn.
Contact database. Yeah.
Right. And then he realized, well, there's people making money over here. So he, right. And they may not have created the category, but these two innovative founders pivoted their technology and took over the category. And now they're the 800-pound gorillas in the space.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned that because just last episode, someone made the difference between creating a category and leading a category, or just like innovating within it. And you just told the story of how, there's something happening anyway, people on the field were people like you, where the change was already like a reality. And then there was an opportunity maybe 5, 7, 10 years later. I wonder if go ahead.
Yeah, just the exciting thing is the whole reason the SDR role is as prevalent and powerful today is because of that technology, right? Sales reps spend all their time in CRM. SDRs spend all their time in sales engagement. I mean, that category has lifted the role and the function of the SDR to like rock star status. If you don't have an SDR team and you're selling B2B enterprise software, you're not doing it fast enough if you don't have an SDR. So for me, it was an unbelievable, glorious time for my career that here are these founders coming in and making a much needed category even bigger. So I applaud all of them.
Very cool. Let's change gears for a second. Sometimes one question that I like to ask that usually brings up interesting stories from folks like you is to talk about a moment of failure, of personal failure, something that you've done that you're directly accountable for that resulted in, some, just like a loss of a customer or an investor, just like some shit show that went because of you. When you think about, when I ask that question, I use those words, do one of you have a quick story that comes to mind?
I mean, for me, the biggest failures were, in hiring. I mean, as you start anything, that first hire or those first initial hires, if you end up hiring someone that doesn't work out in the beginning, you might be making up to 1.5 years, if not 2-year mistake. First of all, you got to recognize that you made a mistake in hiring. That takes typically 3, 6, if not 9 months. Then you got to figure out what to do with that mistake, and it might take 3 to 6 months to try to get rid of it, and then you have to hire over that. So you could literally not launch because of it. And so I know that many people who are my age have made a lot of hiring mistakes, and you juxtapose that with making a rock star hire right out of the gate, and how much that can propel you and leapfrog. So when I look at those two things, and I've done both, stay away from, we say wait for great. Make sure that the person you're hiring is going to be able to wear a few different hats right out of the gate if you're just starting something as a founder. But that's where most of my pain has been, is in human capital and hiring.
Thank you. I think that's a great point. I still want to hear your personal story, or a personal story from you, but I'll take the general rule. That's a very, very good rule. I can emphasize with that, and I'm sure Mikita can as well. Mikita, do you have a personal story that is something that is still burnt in your mind of a big failure you've had?
You don't have enough time in the day for those stories.
No?
If I get stuck, I do. And what I'm saying is I don't have enough time in the day for all of my stories to surface. All right, let's start like very early. My co-founder and I have been endlessly arguing about the design of the product and the color of the buttons and what the product should do and a bunch of other issues. The problem is we're basing all of that on our own opinions. And one of the decisions that we made was that, well, we know what to build, we know what's needed in the market, we know we can do it better, and just gonna build it the way we think it should be built and with the feature set that we think it should have, and we'll make it free to save on the engineering of the least important part, which is billing. And then when the time comes, we'll attach billing and people will start paying us. Spend a lot of time building all the features that we fantasized, and of course a lot of money, and then a lot of time and again money to drive the free users of the product into the product, to drive free users into the product. And then once we attach the billing, we learned that out of about 3,000, back then we were calling them customers, out of 3,000 users, we got only 7 that converted into any sort of subscription. And at the time, the lowest subscription we had was like $9, and the most expensive one was probably like $30 per month. That was a big humbling blow, and that helped us to rethink how much we know, how much we should like trust the hypotheses and the assumptions that we have, and how much time we should spend with the actual customers that have the actual need. So that's one. I can keep going. Hiring mistakes, God, I made so many. Yeah, like leadership mistakes, probably even more. And we can go to market mistakes, absolutely. But yeah, you know, the thing about, say, my job is that as long as the company is growing fast enough, I'm not going to be qualified for my job, like over and over and over and over again. And that humbling experience is gonna come in on a regular basis. I've not done what I'm doing before. It's the first time. This is my first rodeo, and I fuck up. But you know, it's how I learn too.
Will do.
Love it. Thank you. That was awesome. 2 things I took for it from, first of all, that example with all the data is awesome. Look, it was your first customers. You probably still partied and like celebrated it, even though it was just 7, or what I hope so, at least. You deserve it.
By the time we spent almost all of our savings, and I don't remember any sort of fighting.
Well, you probably blacked out. No, I hear you. Anyway, I think it's beautiful that you shared all of that. Thank you. And really, I think every founder that will remember what you just said. It's a humbling experience, and you're constantly unqualified. I don't think I heard that before. That was very good. Lars, do you want to add anything to your very important lesson about hiring?
I mean, what do they say? Measure twice, cut once. I mean, you do background checks. I mean, there's so many ways to, you know, when you're behind in hiring, it's easy to want to take a chance.
Right.
And the minute you decide you're going to take a chance is, I think, when you where you're going to start making a mistake.
Oh yeah, with the perfect balance.
You know, the good news is, you know, in the world I live in, LinkedIn and connections and references, I mean, I can find out just about everything there is to know about someone who has a track record, because there's connectivity there. So I've made, you know, the world has made it a lot easier for me to make sure I don't make as many hiring mistakes. At the same time, I do a lot of hiring with, young adults coming out of college or younger adults changing their careers and wanting to try sales. And so what is it that makes a great, SDR or future seller? And I've come up with a term, a lot of people will say grit. I call it fire in the belly. Like if you're a self-motivating and self-starting individual, that is, I think, all I need to realize that I have someone that I can work with. Get them a little bit early. They don't have as many bad habits, and I can train them, and I can educate, mentor, and coach them. So I make a lot fewer mistakes today, but I also, we're growing at such a fast clip at Snowflake. And I mean, I literally, I think I have to hire 100 SDRs this year, close to it anyway. And that's a lot of people to go through. Is every single one going to be, that rock star that goes up and to the right? No. Anyway.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Let's take a pause and drink. I have been anyway, but give you a pause for a second. Mikita, you're in San Francisco right now. Did I hear you correctly? You moved to California?
Close enough. I live in Pacifica.
Pacifica. Oh, nah,
Great spot.
Love Pacifica. Yeah, Pacifica is awesome. I thought about the connotation of Pacifica, and it confused me for a second. Do you smoke weed?
No.
Oh, okay. So otherwise I could have sent you through ease and those things, but
no worries.
No, not gonna work. We'll figure it out. We have, it's the rest of our life to figure out what to intoxicate with. Well, cheers anyway, and enjoy that.
So good.
I wanted to ask something else. You both worked, you said first rodeo, Mikita, but you've been working on Pandadoc for how long? 8 years, 9 years?
Pandadoc is 8 years old.
8 years old.
The company is 11 years old. We had a different product that preceded
Absolutely.
Pandadoc.
Hey, you don't have to explain to me. I had the same difference. So 8 years old, but you've worked on it even before in different business model, what have you. You're not really at your first rodeo anymore. Gary Nakamura, one of my first angel investors, told me after 3 years, you don't have to say anymore that you're first time because you already made all the possible mistakes. So you have a little bit of street cred. So for you, it's been a long. And for you, Lars, you have been at it for like probably 25, 30 years, if I understand correctly from calculating the years. You've seen a lot of things in Silicon Valley and in tech startups. And I think there's a consensus that some of those things are true, some of the perception about the Silicon Valley company, and some of them are not true. And also some things need to change. Some bullshits that exist that almost everyone who works in the Valley kind of want to see them change. What is an absolute truth that you experience personally that might not be the common knowledge of common agreement? Something that you've maybe read in text, like TechCrunch, or heard about in SaaStr, or you're like in one of those meetings and you hear someone repeating that mantra on that supposed knowledge, but that's not the way it goes. Like it's completely different and everyone knows it. Is there something that comes to mind about Silicon Valley or tech startup growing that might be worthwhile sharing?
Well, what I remember, so I was a part of the first bubble, the one that started, in the mid 90s, and then the one that burst. And what I remember from that time is there was all these founders going around, trying to get money and trying to get people to look at their ideas, and they all ran around with NDAs, right? You have to sign my NDA because you can't tell anyone about this because I have this great idea and I'm going to disrupt this category. And everyone had it. The number of times I went into a sales pitch and everyone had to sign the NDAs back and forth. It just was a thing. Then the bubble burst, and it took us a while to kind of get back on our feet again, the venture-backed startup community. But I think what I saw is it's so hard to start a company. It's even harder to get funding and then try to grow that company and go to all the different levels. I can tell you today, no one walks around with an NDA anymore. Like if you're going to start something, you better have really, really thick skin, and then you're going to ask for help. And I think what's happened in the last 2 decades is everyone realizes how hard the founder journey is. We got to help them. We got to help them with everything we have. And I spend time advising a local seed stage venture capital firm called True Ventures. And again, if there's anything I can do to help them not make the same mistakes that Mikita made when he started one of his first companies, then I'm all for it. You don't have to sign my NDA. I will give you my playbooks. I'll give you the results of my failures and some of my successes. But let's help founders. Let's give them everything we have without asking for anything in return, because they need help. And it's just interesting. There was this like, no, me, it's my idea. You have to sign something before I show it to you, to now, man, this is really hard. Let's just jump in and help each other. And I do feel that there's a lot more people willing to help and give than there was before. And that's a really big difference from, the Valley 1.0 to, what it is today.
That's awesome. Mikita, I saw you smile quite a bit when you heard Lars. Did you want to respond to that?
I'm glad I was not here when it was 1.0. I think at the time I got here, that was like the biggest thing that probably the biggest thing that drove me to stay. The number of very experienced, intelligent people and experienced as it comes to what I do that are willing to help. I love that. I absolutely love that. And that's why I'm here. I feel like this is the place where I can be the dumbest guy in the room and I can learn, and that won't stop. Probably would be the case in many other places too, but I just like it here so much. Plus there's surfing and there's skiing and a bunch of other really cool things.
Especially in Pacifica. That's awesome. That's great. Is there something that you want to share that you've experienced, Mikita, as a well-known truth or perception about the Valley, that you actually experienced something different as your founder, as during your journey as a founder?
Well, they say it's easy to raise money these days. I did that such a long time ago. I did that 8 years ago. It was not easy, but it was 8 years ago. That's when I was kind of like in the midst of raising money in Silicon Valley. Very, very different climate, and it's very hard for me to comment on that. Less NDAs flying around. Well, less usage for Pandadoc. Not sure how I feel about that. Actually, I feel good about it. But yeah, we're a Series C company, and being a Series C company, no matter where you are, is very different from being a startup. It's pretty awesome though. I love where we are today. I think it's fun. I also loved when we were a small startup, and you can do more things with your hands and iterate and so on and so forth. And now the challenge is completely different. I don't do anything with my hands anymore, and when I do, it fails typically. So yeah. I like Silicon Valley. I like it a lot. I've not found a place in the world where I would want to be more than here.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about for a second a little bit to go back to kind of your earlier comments about category creation. One of the things that that CEOs and founders sometimes end up doing is at least, exercise, go through the exercise of considering whether they should or should not do it. For the ones who decide it's a good idea to do it, and you can speak from personal experience, that will be most helpful. Do you have you been in a company that created a category or led a category? And if you were active participant in that process, is there one tactic that you were personally witnessed that made a big difference? I'll give you examples of answers that I got to this question. Like one of them was, we sent an army of customers to pick up the phone and call analysts. We had it with a program for it. Another one was we tripled pricing so that we have a moment to answer the question, why do you cost 3x than the rest? Those were some examples. Do you have ones that you can share with audience?
We are in the very beginning of our journey. And I'd say that we at Pandadoc try to listen as much as we can right now and learn as much as we can versus share the best practices. It's just way too early.
Okay, that's a fair comment. Thank you. Lars, you've been I think you mentioned every company that you worked for had an IPO, right? Or a $1 billion outcome. Can you, I will make an assumption, especially since I know some of those companies like Cloudera, some of those companies did create category or led them. Do you have anything that comes to mind as you see as a constant tactic or predictable, something that is likely to work that you've seen successful?
Well, again, I chose a couple of duds. No, not duds. There was a few companies that were in between those where, that went nowhere. And that's also a part of the experience of being in the Valley. But
absolutely,
when I look back at all 5 of them, including Snowflake, get my camera here, the leadership team, and again, in all 5 companies, the founder ended up not being the CEO that brought it across the line. It happens both ways, but I ended up realizing, and again, I followed a few very notable business CEOs. And again, when you're a business CEO, venture wants you to take over their companies, quote unquote, the companies they've backed. It's just really hard to scale. Once you get to 1 million, you got to try to get to 10 million, and then you got to try to get to 25 million and 100 million. It just gets so hard. And when I realized after hitting a few duds that to me, I realized if you follow really good venture money and you follow really good executive teams, the product has to work. It's got to be in a category that's, being lifted and what have you. But I think the ingredients, executive team, product, and money, I would put my bet on the business side, the executive teams, and where the money's coming from. And, as long as the product works, it doesn't have to be the best. There's a lot of products and services and technologies out there that were not the best, but man, when they had a selling and marketing motion, they got the word out, the brand out, and were able to, share how they solved a problem. That's what a lot of people go for. And so I think selling and marketing has a lot to do with brands and technologies and companies going to the next level. And I just happen to follow on really good venture capital and business oriented executives that decided intentionally to go to this company versus another one, right? Seasoned executives understand the companies that are going to be able to punch through, in my opinion.
Absolutely. That's great. So team, investor, product, really team is for you the highest priority. That's
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. The amount of communication and alignment that needs to exist when you go from 10 people to 100 people to 1,000 people, you have to, I mean, again, there's a lot of things that creep into culture, some good, some bad, but as you get bigger, communication and alignment become two of the most important forces in my mind, because people, when change happens quickly, people need to be led through that, in my opinion. They need to be talked to, communicated, and led. They actually want it. And business CEOs that have been there before, or executives that have been there before and done that, they know, they have all the scars and they understand. I joined an unbelievable business-oriented executive team at Snowflake, right? They're all purpose kind of, they were all, curated and brought together, by our current leader, Frank Slootman.
very cool. I think that's very interesting, especially to companies that are going through that growth, but I think for everyone in general. Hey, folks, we're about to come to the end of this episode. Mikita, I know you have a hard stop in 5 minutes. Would love for both of you to leave one remark to, early stage founders and marketers in SaaS companies, and people in B2B companies in general. Is there a piece of advice that you'd like to kind of leave the audience, the listeners with? Mikita, you can start giving your hard stop.
Try to enjoy it. Try to enjoy it. Keep learning and try to enjoy it. I think that's all that matters.
Yeah, I'll take a slightly different tack, but it's similar. So I've been operating in the Valley for about 25 years. I've been out of school working for 35 years, and I've lost. I've lost along the way on the home front and on the personal front, because the amount of attention and focus and dedication that it takes to want to either be a startup founder or join a startup and help them grow. I didn't realize how much I would lose on the home front and on the personal front, and I did end up losing. And I think that anyone that wants to become involved in the Valley in a startup, regardless of what role or position, is make sure you've got things squared away on your personal front, on your health front, on your relationship front, and share, because as soon as you don't, there's this divide that will end up creeping in. And if the persons you're with at home or in your other circles aren't understanding what you're going through, there's a divide that happens. And again, I've lost on the personal front, and I will tell you that it didn't have everything to do, but it had to do with, just how much I was traveling, just how much attention and weekends and all the things that you do when you burn the midnight oil, so to speak. So I think you have to be very intentional if you want to get into this space. You have to have the cycles, because it can very quickly take over on the personal side, on the mental health side, and you just got to watch out for it.
Love that. How can I not? I think every founder has experienced that deeply, and there is a good, good content. Really, thank you for sharing that. I think it's one of the probably top best answers I got for this one. I won't forget it myself. Thank you for sharing. Hey, Mikita and Lars, I really enjoyed today's episode. Thank you very much for joining and speaking your mind and spending an hour with me.
Right on, Gil. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's
Have a
my
wonderful
pleasure.
weekend.
Nice to meet you, Lars.
You too, Mikita.
Bye, gents.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed today's discussion and will tune in again. Find all of the B2B Category Creators episodes at Metadata.io. And if you have any feedback, topics, or would like to be a guest on the show, please reach out.